Alright guys, welcome. Today we're going to start with colonial America. And when you think of colonial America, you think of when it was discovered. So basically, when America was discovered for Europe, we always say Christopher Columbus landed in the New World. Well, there was a person, a Viking known as Leif Erikson, and he's thought to have landed in North America almost 500 years before Columbus. These guys were using it for fishing, but they weren't really into colonizing it, which is why there's not a lot of their culture here. Now, even though there were other people that explored, Columbus is generally credited with the discovery of this new world. His four voyages, the first of which began in 1492, made Spain a major colonial force. So, he came over for the Spanish, landed close to Florida, which is one of the reasons why Florida became a Spanish-held colony, but he himself was Italian. And if we look back through the history, he was also going for the highest bidder. Whoever would pay him to find this new route to India, he was going to take it. We go on about 5 years later, and there's a man named Giovanni Caboto, or John Cabot. He was the one who first settled for the British. Although his new claim was really around Canada, it was still around North America. His exact landing, though, isn't really known. What they believe is it's what is now Newfoundland. Okay, he wanted to find a northwestern passage route through the Atlantic Ocean, north of Canada, that would allow ships to reach Asia more quickly. But as we know, you can't go up above Canada, so obviously he failed in that endeavor. Now we're going to look at two other guys, a man named Balboa and a man named Magellan. Vasco Núñez de Balboa was a Spanish conquistador. He heard of what they called the Other Sea, of course we know now as the Pacific Ocean, and he was serving as governor in an area of the Caribbean coast in South America. The natives have talked about a kingdom that had lots of gold, and so he and his men went in 1513 on an expedition across the Isthmus of Panama in an attempt to find gold. Of course, during the expedition he was attacked by the natives. The Spaniards won their battles, but many of their troops were lost, and most of the men chose to stay behind. They didn't want to finish crossing all the way, and so when the first Europeans found Balboa, he had discovered what they call the South Sea. Now, of course, now we know that's the Pacific Ocean. And since Balboa had crossed the Isthmus of Panama, and they already had a land route, there's a man named Ferdinand Magellan. And Ferdinand Magellan believed that it would be possible to sail from the Atlantic Ocean south of South America and come up on the Pacific Ocean. And he did, however. Now, there were storms, many of his sailors were lost, and of course he died somewhere in the Philippines where he got in a fight and was stabbed. But his crew that survived was the first crew to circumnavigate, to go all the way around the earth by boat. Let's talk about some of these other guys, though, other famous explorers that came. So in 1577, this man, Sir Francis Drake, led the first English voyage attempting to sail around the earth. His trips was not just for exploration, but to raid Spanish settlements in the Americas. Since England was at war with Spain, he was able to make money out of it. Of course, he didn't get all the way around the globe, but Sir Francis Drake was known for his tactics. He was a pirate, and he would attack other ships. And when we think of pirates, we think of someone who had no loyalty. He was loyal to the British. He was loyal to England. But he was a pirate for England. So think about that. How cool would that be to get to be a pirate for a country? So just take a second, discuss in your own mind what type of pirate you want to be and what country you'd be a pirate for. When you're done, push play and we'll continue on. So we're going to talk about this man Hudson. An English explorer. He sailed North America in an attempt to find a northwestern passage to Asia. Once again, up above. While he couldn't find the passage, he did explore a huge area, territory, now known as New York State, as well as in what is now Canada. So his discoveries included the Hudson River and Hudson Bay, hence the name Hudson. Didn't see that one coming, did you? All right, Columbian Exchange. This wasn't just an exchange for goods and animals. This was an exchange of culture. It was an exchange of language, of art, but also one of the biggest and deadliest was smallpox and many other diseases. Crops, animals, there were no horses in the New World, and so horses became a major part. However, there was also no typhoid, influenza, cholera, and smallpox in the New World, which also were passed on. Conquistadors. Now, conquistadors, you can think of the word conquer when you hear that. These Spanish conquistadors included Cortes, Pizarro, and Coronado. They had better weapons than Native Americans, they had horses, and they spread disease as well, which helped out in conquering. Everywhere they went, the people they were fighting would get sick, and then they were easier to defend or fight off, one of the two. The explorers, often when the conquistadors came, many of them were poor. They rarely had shoes. Some of them only had the weapons and the clothes on their back, and that was it. They were here to find gold and to make a fortune in the new land, to basically conquer as a conquest. Let's talk about the French that came. We've talked about the French in the class a little bit. They were here to trap furs, to fish. They set up Catholic missionaries, not quite as prevalent as the Spanish Catholic missionaries, but they did want permanent settlements. However, as a fur trapper, the French made more friends with the Native Americans than Indians. The Dutch. Okay, these guys I like. This is because they're family members of mine. But the Dutch exploration settlement in the New World began in 1609 with Henry Hudson's exploration of the Hudson River, or now Hudson River. His exploration led to the establishment of fur trading posts that would become New York State. And in 1624, Governor Peter Minuit purchased the island of Manhattan from the natives. So he bought the island from the Native Americans, and the Dutch renamed it New Amsterdam, making it the capital of their colony of New Netherlands. Get this, new, rather than the original one, you just add new to it. So if we ever take over some place outside in the ocean, we'll call it New Texas, just for fun. It was the first real settlement. However, the territory surrendered to the British in 1674, where they changed it from New Amsterdam to New York. Joint stock companies. It was very expensive to try to create a colony. So what this did is it allowed multiple investors to invest enough money to start the colony all in one. Plus, wherever it was, whichever monarch or king or queen ruled over that colony as it was being established would also get their take in taxes or revenue from it. Let's talk about Roanoke Colony. Several people had attempted to settle Roanoke Colony, and it's called the Lost Colony because at one point the colonists that were left there, when a group had left and then come back, they couldn't find the group anywhere. There were some clues left here and there about where they might have gone, but there were no bodies, no one had died, and they couldn't find anything. So if you want to have a little fun, research the Lost Colony and find some stuff on your own. This guy, Richard Hakluyt. Okay. If we look right here, it became clear that individuals could not establish colonies, and the royal leaders needed to get involved. In his 1584 work, Discourse on Western Planting, the British writer Richard Hakluyt promoted this idea. In Hakluyt's view, building forts in North America would keep the Spanish from attacking the British settlements in the New World. He also believed that colonization would help spread Protestantism. So once again, spreading of religion. That's very important. Make a note of that, because you're going to have questions about why people set up, where they set up, and right here, it wasn't just for money, it was also to spread religion. So, as provided wealth by both creating new markets and British goods and increasing tax revenues. He noted that American forests could also provide timber to help bigger navy, so more ships. So what he did is he would write about how the country itself should establish colonies, not businesses. So take it out of the private sector, put it back in the government. That way, the government could make money. However, Queen Elizabeth I didn't act on his proposals. It was only after her death that England began to seriously try to colonize North America. Even at that point, private investors made most of the effort. So the kings and queens missed out on that. The London and Plymouth companies. Merchants had asked the James I for charters. They formed two joint stock companies. Those companies had a lot of independence, and their main goal of colonization was to find precious metal. As we all know, Jamestown was founded in 1607, but finding precious metals didn't happen. We found that more precious than metal was food. These people often starved to death looking for gold. King James I was the first one to charter, he chartered two joint stock companies. That's what you need to remember on that one, Virginia. So although the colonial charter stated that one of the company's goals was to spread Christianity to the Indians, it also stressed the need to search or dig or mine for silver, copper, and gold. So they said, we're going to spread Christianity and find precious metals. Jamestown. Now I know we're getting a little closer to where you are right now. So the colonists landed May 1607, settled in a mosquito-infested swamp. Okay, you know what's the problem there, and did not plant crops the first year. So they show up. They've eaten much of their food on the way. They didn't plant anything. Many of the settlers were not used to manual labor. They came over and wanted to find new jobs, and they weren't used to digging, planting, working. More than half of them died in the first winter. Now, I know there weren't a lot of people there, but still, to lose half of your people is very disheartening. Captain John Smith. Now, I don't know about you guys, but the name Captain John Smith plus a beard like that, you just got to be a cool dude. Okay, he was one of the original settlers for Jamestown. He helped to organize it, build shelters, grow food. However, relationships with the Indians were strained, and he also stayed in Jamestown only 2 years. You'd think with a cool beard like that, you'd actually do more for your town than just stay a couple of years. Let's go to, here we are. He successfully managed to get food and supplies, traded with the local Indians as well. However, he also had no qualms about taking advantage of the Indians. So he would trade with them, but in the end, if you just wanted to take something, he would take it anyway. So at one point, there's a group, the Powhatan Indians. They captured Smith. He later claimed that the chief's daughter, a woman named Pocahontas, begged her father and family to spare his life, but the story is probably more legend than fact. My personal conspiracy theory is there was money involved somewhere, but that's just mine. But that's also based on the fact that everywhere else in history I've ever seen people getting freed from captivity, usually someone profited somewhere. Smith did successfully change the fortunes of Jamestown colony for better. However, he only stayed in Virginia for just a few years. The starving time. No, this is not a new diet. Okay, this is a time in the winter of 1609. Food was short. Only 60 colonists survived, and Jamestown was almost completely abandoned. Yes, there is some talk about cannibalism, but we're not going to go into that. Only 60 of the colonists had actually survived, and the settlers were ready to abandon Jamestown. But a supply ship with more settlers and food saved the colony and allowed the settlers to stay, just in the nick of time. Let's talk about John Rolfe and tobacco. Now, you could say this is the point where America began to shape itself. Tobacco could not be eaten. It was what was known as a cash crop. So it became very popular. In fact, it was so popular that the kings and queens of England warned against people using tobacco because they said it was not good for their life, for their health. They might not live as long. They had no idea that cancer was being caused by much of what they were smoking, as we know nowadays, but they still felt like it was not healthy. Could have been from all the coughing caused when you get older. The native Virginian tobacco was undesirable, so Ralph introduced the West Indies crop. So they brought in some new types of tobacco. Production provided economic independence, which means they supported themselves. Economic independence means they didn't have to rely on an outside source. And Ralph married Pocahontas, which, as we know, she was family members and to their leader of the what tribe? Can you tell me? Yes, I'm acting. My child's been watching. What are they? The Little Einsteins. So they're always asking questions. So you might as well answer it too. Yes, the Powhatan tribe. Good job. I knew you knew that. All right, Bacon's Rebellion. Here's another cool guy, Nathaniel Bacon. If you want a cool name, name your child Nathaniel Bacon. Because one thing, the name Nathan is pretty cool. I like that one. But to have bacon in your name, not only that, to be a rebel. So, many frontier planters who lived inland in Virginia disliked colonial authority. So, get that in your minds. People did not like the authority of the colony telling them what to do. You see those seeds of dissent being sown into the colonists already at the very beginning of the country. In particular was Governor William Berkeley. When these planters asked his permission to authorize an expedition, or an armed campaign against the Indians who supposedly had been attacking the plantation, Berkeley refused. So he said, no, you cannot fight back to the Native Americans. The planters, led by Nathaniel Bacon, then took matters in their own hands, and Berkeley called Bacon a traitor. Bacon's forces not only attacked the Indian settlements, but he also went ahead and burned Jamestown as well. Okay, so he went a little too far on that. However, at the height of the rebellion, Bacon died suddenly. Boom. Okay, suddenly died. Although no official cause of death was reported, most authorities believe he died of dysentery. Look that one up on your own. We'll talk about that later. All right, with the rebellion leader gone, the British soldiers were able to easily crush the rest of the rebellion, and they went back to obeying the kings and queens for a few more years. We've got a couple more slides left. Let's get to slide 20, will be the last one. Powhatans. Many of the early settlers accepted Indian aid. They said, yes, we'll use that. But then the settlers, in return, took the land and resources by force. So when they ran out of food, they knew the Powhatans had food, and they would just take it. Both settlers and Indians guilty of brutal attacks. The Native Americans would come in and kill off the colonists. The colonists would turn around and kill the Native Americans, back and forth. There was not a good relationship. Next thing that we have are the Puritans. These were members of the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. Some were British citizens. They went to America for money. Others wanted freedom. And these were sent by Queen Elizabeth I for the Anglican Church of England. It had become the country's official religion. However, the Anglican Church under Elizabeth was much like the Catholic Church. So they kind of changed the name, had many of the same traditions. Many of the Anglicans did not like following the Catholic rule. They believed the Church of England should focus more on reading and interpreting the scriptures rather than on ceremonies of the Catholic Church. They wanted to purify the Anglican Church. This word purify, they became known as Puritans because they were purifying their beliefs. Put that in your notes. I will ask you about the Puritans, the Anglican Church. You need to know that. So they were called Puritans. However, many of the Puritans were happy to accept this name and take pride in it, even though some didn't like the name that was put onto it. And last tribe for today, Puritan life. Last slide for today. Another slip up there. Okay, the expectations of the Puritan family life were similar to the Puritan communities. Upright behavior. You had to follow a precise rule of conduct. The idea came from biblical commandments. The father was often the head of the family. Women were considered unequal. And the family included relatives as well as father, mother, and children. And children were often harshly disciplined. Okay. So there was a rule or philosophy that was used, spare the rod, spoil the child. And that meant you had to completely obey your parents' rule, and your mother had to completely obey your father's rule, and your father also ruled over all the family up until the grandfather, and it was a hierarchy of family members. You can imagine how that went. Well, I'm going to go and stop here, but when we get back to it, I will have the rest of the slides for you tomorrow afternoon.